Microsoft Xbox is one of the most popular gaming consoles we all know, but it was built out of panic. And to understand how this happened, we need to look at a brief history of how it was created, why it was created, and basically everything you need to know about the Xbox. So let's start with why it was created. You see, in the late 1990s, Microsoft was the king of software. But then, Sony PlayStation 2 was launched, and from the way it was presented, it seemed it was going to replace home PCs. And so this left Bill Gates in a state of panic. And to fight back, Bill Gates originally went to Sony for partnership, requesting that they would build the operating system. But Sony, they weren't ready for that kind of conversation, so they kicked off the deal. And Bill Gates wasn't ready to give up, so they had to build their own consoles. Now, here's the problem. They didn't have any budget or factory. So they went to the IT storage room of Microsoft, picked some Dell laptops, and then they hacked it together to get their first prototype. And because it could run on the software DirectX, they called it the DirectX box. But when they presented the prototype to Bill Gates, he said it was an insult to the company. But they reminded him that Sony was going to destroy Windows, so he had no choice than to fund the project. So they went on with the design. And the lead designer was Horace Luce. He packed everything, including permanent markers, to make the branding. And once he started drawing, his colleagues kept on coming to borrow his permanent markers. And by the time he wanted to finish with the permanent marker, it was only left with one color, which was neon green. And that's the reason why Xbox has the color neon green. So they went on to design the controllers. And because they had no experience in designing gamepads, they had to fix in big circuit board, which ended up being massive. And when it was released to the public, they started mocking it, which forced Microsoft to then redesign it again. Finally, with all these designs, they had no game, so they decided to do something very risky. So in 1999, Steve Jobs announced the future of Mac gaming, and he announced a sci-fi revolution game called Halo, and it was designed by a small studio called Bangai. And after the presentation, Microsoft went to Bangai telling them they want to buy the whole studio, they will fund their debts and a whole lot of things. So Bangai accepted the money, and in the next morning, Steve Jobs found out that his flagship game has been bought by his biggest rival, but it was too late. So in 2001, they kept pushing, so they released the Xbox Live. During that period, about 10% of people were owning broadband. So it was something like an investment. And around the mid-2000s, when broadband exploded, Microsoft was light years ahead of Sony, and they spent about $4 billion in manufacturing costs and other things, but they achieved the purpose of not allowing Sony to destroy home PC gaming. So let me know your thoughts, and I'll see you in the next story.